How long ago was it? Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm here with DeWitt Henry. We're going to talk about his book, Sweet Marjoram, right?
Or Marjoram.
Marjoram.
Not to be confused with margarine.
Oh, yeah, not margarine. DeWitt Henry was the founding editor of Plowshares. You still are, as far as I know.
Yes, yeah. It's in the past tense.
Yeah. And he has published a novel, 2 memoirs, a story collection, and several anthologies. A professor emeritus at Emerson College, and serves as a contributing editor to both Woven Tale Press and Solstice Magazine. He has a website, DeWittHenry.com. That's DeWitt Henry.com. Welcome aboard here, DeWitt.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure.
Okay. Just check this for a minute. Okay. So this book, Sweet Marjoram, is a stream of consciousness, sort of about using abstract terms from a learned man. You know, I mean, it's. Could you maybe
more learned maybe than wise?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not a pedantic person so much as I am just a curious person, and I've spent a lot of my life reading and teaching literature, and I do believe in the old 1950s idea that literature is a help in your life, and that it helps you supposedly to understand the mysteries.
Has it helped you?
Yeah, I think that if it hadn't been for literature, that I would have been in McLean's.
I was there for many years.
I know. Along with.
Why is that?
You were on the right side of the bed.
I was heading towards that direction, but why do you, anything you just didn't think you had any direction, or sort of an existential crisis, or?
I've had my existential crises, yes, and I've written about them in earlier memoirs. But the rites of passage in the sense of human solidarity, and also of human value, is literature is the mirror for that. And kids, even though they or teenagers and people coming of age, even though they have their own versions of something that serves as literature, whether it's rap or popular fantasy or anything like that, it's a mirror. It's where you look searchingly, I guess, for reassurance.
Because someone's been through it before,
and you're not a freak. You're not the only existential person in crisis.
Okay. So, a lot of, they say poets and writers, especially poets, have a highest rate of suicide than the general population, because I don't know what they define a poet.
No one's ever actually correlated that.
Yeah.
A. Alvarez has a book called The Savage God.
Yeah.
And he was Sylvia Plath's husband.
Right.
And also had his own suicidal.
He was Sylvia Plath's husband?
Do I have that wrong?
Because Ted Hughes was Sylvia Plath's husband.
He was her friend then.
Friend, yeah, right.
Beg your pardon. But he goes on at length about suicidal tendencies as almost biomechanical. They're part of a system, and that survivors tend to blame themselves, thinking that something could have been done for somebody that really is in despair and at the end of their rope, as it were.
Yeah.
But it's a more inevitable process than that.
So, getting back to the sweet, I have a...
Poets have no, he wrote, have no advantage over heads of corporations or milkmen.
Yeah. That's, well, Wallace Stevens was a big man in the insurance.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. But, so just so I took another look at King Lear. I hadn't read it in a long time, but I mean, the title comes from sweet, and I'm bad with pronunciations. Marjoram.
Which is a spice, it turns out.
I thought it was a flower.
It is a flower, but spice comes from the flower.
Oh, okay.
It's related to oregano.
So anyway, Lear was wearing this, right? And he was...
Lear was insane on...
That's what I'm saying. He was
on Dover Beach, and he runs into Edgar, who's disguised and leading Gloucester,
okay,
his father. And Lear, in his madness, thinks that they might be an enemy, and so he demands a password. Mm-hmm. And without two beats, Edgar says, "Sweet Marjoram," and Lear says, "Pass."
Yeah, wasn't he adorned with like some?
In a lot of productions, he is.
Yeah, he was adorned, and so that he was.
But it's not in the text.
It's not in the text.
It's a spontaneous, imaginative, witty thing that Edgar says.
Oh, okay. So why? The question is why you use this line.
Because the footnote tells you, Sweet Marjoram at the time was thought to cure madness.
Yeah.
So Edgar is seeing that Lear is anguished and insane.
Right.
And he's trying to play along and find a password. And what he's really saying is, I'm a friend. Mm-hmm. I'm not an enemy. I'm somebody that's on your side.
Okay. And how does that relate to the book, though? I mean,
that's what I've wanted these essays to do. They're a stream of consciousness of a thoughtful person, relatively average thoughtful person, who's very taken with the misuse of words and the abuse of words, even.
Abuse?
Well, I go back to Orwell.
Okay.
Talking about war is peace and peace is war. There's a certain something that's been going on for not just the Trump era, but even before that, where words that have rich DNA have been flattened and distorted into buzzwords. That
not like spam. Oh.
Spam. Maybe let's do a poem about spam.
Yeah.
There I go. I'm off. I'm already. Spam isn't.
Spam is now a computer word.
That's unwanted literature. That's spam, but it's also bad ham.
Yeah.
Canned.
But I was going to ask you. These words that you take apart and sort of have free association with. When you have, we're going to get into some meaty subject here, but when you have, you were talking about meat and how Tolstoy, sort of was against eating meat, and then you go into the very vernacular of beating one's meat. But you seem to flow easily between the sort of academic and the commonplace.
It's like a kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
All those little fragments shake into some kind of design.
Yeah.
And in my mind and in my obsession of free associating and trying to find every possible meaning, whether it's technical and in the dictionary, or whether it's a figure of speech, or it's in popular culture, or whatever. I want to get all those fragments of meaning and then twist them until they get into a design. Mm-hmm. Going on about meat, the connection between venery, which has the meaning of intercourse. Ben Franklin wants to control his venery in his memoir. Also means deer hunting, and what a curious thing that is. So right from the beginning, that idea of quarry, mm-hmm. And of appetite, and of what we now call objectivization of women, is all about meat.
Where's the beef? So, and you seem to be having a good time. I mean, are you with this?
None of this is premeditated.
Yeah.
It may be meditative, but it's not premeditated.
Yeah.
And if anything, as I started to do these, I just retired from teaching. And I thought, okay, now I have a long prose thing I want to do, another memoir. And that kind of loomed as a super project. And as I was trying to zone myself into it, I started like doodling on the side and having fun. And the fun was with these words.
Right.
And so I kind of, without realizing what I was doing, invented a form. And it's to take an abstract word, which has no narrative content at all. Meat is not a value word, but courage is a value word, and conscience is a value word. There are lots of moral words that are abstract that way. And also who are words which are again, as I say, flattened in meaning now. Courage in particular is one that we immediately think of the political realm and JFK's profiles in courage, and everybody's lamenting that our politicians today are seem to lack that kind of integrity. But also courage in writers like Hemingway, or even one of my favorites, Tim O'Brien. It tends to be a macho quality, and or in literature anyway, a macho quality. And we've got Falstaff in Shakespeare saying the better part of valor.
And segueing, and you have a piece on grading, and I do a lot of grading myself, but you bring in Hal and Falstaff, and I guess Falstaff, of course, was a conniver, sort of claimed that he was
the world's greatest cheat.
Yeah. And you talked about you didn't cheat, but you had a little. When you were a student, you had a little conniving kind of thing.
No, but there was a professor that was doing mind games with us, and he basically said, grade yourself.
Okay.
Put down the grade you think you deserve. And I was too embarrassed to put down A. So I put down B+, and that's what he gave me.
Yeah.
I was looking for, to say, oh, you're being too modest. Really, you did better than that.
Yeah. So, you say, you ask your students, should you have the vitalism of Falstaff or the duty or of Hal? I mean, maybe
the honor-bound sense of a responsibility of Hal.
Yeah.
Should you be somebody who connects with the world, the social contract, who wants to be, who is a good ruler, or should you be on a permanent vacation and be a wastrel?
Yeah.
What happens to rulers? And of course they die and they're forgotten.
Yeah.
So for Falstaff anyway, what's the point?
Yeah. I was going to ask you. You turned to poetry you really weren't writing poetry for over 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And now you come back to it. And I find that that's true of a lot of people. When I used to teach adult education, people who had long careers in business or whatever, but they had poetry when they were young, come back to it. Is there something about the poetry that you come back to, or?
Well, again, I think it's part of the same restiveness that rather than actually commit to another novel, and the amount of time that takes, and research and investment here and here. The essays that I was doing verged on prose poems. In fact, there's one called Falling, which was probably the first one that I did. It was just grew out of other literary forms. I had Falling in the first novella I ever wrote is about a rancher, a middle-aged rancher who falls off a horse and who is lamed, and his unworthy son is going to take over the ranch, and up here he's thinking, what's going to become of me? And I had a collection of stories about different kinds of falls, police chief in a Boston suburb I wrote about at length, who was an alcoholic and who was fired from his job and tried to get revenge for it. So I brought my stories together in a collection called Falling 6 Stories. And then I found myself playing with the word and thinking, well, you know, what is the lyrical meaning of falling? What's there? And I did think of flashes in literature of falls, obviously a fall from grace. In King Lear, the pretend fall of Gloucester committing suicide, jumping off a cliff. There are all kinds. Alice going down the rabbit hole. There's so many images of falling in different contexts. And in terms of images, again, the one that's always haunted me is the falling man out of 9/11, out of the skyscraper, who the camera slows down enough that he seems to be imitating Icarus. And whoever he was, we've never found out who he was.
Yeah.
But he seems to be accepting that moment, that he's of imminent non-existence, with some kind of grace. I was fascinated by the kind of daredevils who do skydiving and
I never do that.
the ones who have those kites that they go off a cliff and they just go for miles. And obviously the stock market falls and rises, and there are many other kinds of falls. But how do you end something like that? And there was this moment where a light went off, and I thought, "Rockabye Baby," and the idea at the end of that was that my wife didn't like Rockabye Baby. She didn't want us to use the real lyrics, and she changed it to "Down Will Come Baby into Mommy's Arms." And that's such a sentimental, lovely answer to this anxiety about dying, basically, about accident and about disaster. You know, there's always Mommy's arms. Don't we wish there were, you know? So it's ironic at the end.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I mean, actually, these essays here are sort of poetry-like, and in fact...
Right. Well, that one is a prose poem, and it was published as a prose poem.
Yeah. And Candidate, again, is sort of in that vein. The one that's in the new issue, may I say, of the Ibbotson Street Press. DeWitt Henry's in there. You put him on the front cover. I'm proud of that. But maybe you can do some reading. Maybe we have about 12 minutes. No, 10 minutes. And perhaps you can read your poem. Or
sure, I'd love to.
Something like that. Read a few poems. And by the way, you know, you're the editor an editor at Woven Tale Press, right? Which is
an online arts and literature magazine.
I was very proud to be. I'm very proud to be featured there one time, among many others. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I did there for 3 years was to review internet sites that would be informative or helpful to writers, and it was an adventure for somebody who is in his 70s to relive the excitement of small pressdom in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. It is a new frontier, and what I was on the outlook for was dedication and prescience, and certainly your site offers that.
Thank you. Why don't you read us a poem before we run out of time?
Well, this is a season of candidates vying to be president, and I was with friends, and I thought that one of the things that I could do, having written these essays in Sweet Marjoram on various topics, was to ask for any word. Give me a word. And my host said candor. I said, oh, that's interesting. And I went home and I started thinking about candor, and I went in the dictionary and so forth. And that led to an adventure in associations. That's what's going on here. On candidates, truth tellers whose candor means whiteness or brilliance, whose candid statements are honest or frank. From the Latin candere, to shine or glow, and candy dust, white. Smile, you're on candid camera. Unposed, unguarded. Roman senators wore white like brides in purity or ghosts in winding sheets. For every Coriolanus, a Brutus, Antony, or Caesar, honorable men. He words me, girls. Degraded symbols for their times and ours. Hillary, even in her power suit, whose worldliness I voted for. Performers and mass medians, slogan slingers applauding for themselves and us. Mr. and Mrs. Deeds go to Washington, where sincerity is a social vice. Promise maker, obfuscator, even candles give light. She doth teach the torches to burn bright. Can't hold a candle to her. All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle, according to St. Francis. And Frank agreed. And candling, of course, exposes bad eggs.
Good. That's why we put it in there. Give us some more. You still have about. By the way, I wanted to mention that you had a reading coming up, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
August 23rd, I'm reading in the Armory in Somerville with poets David Gillette, Mary Bonino, and Susan Tepper.
Who's coming up from New York?
He's coming up from New York. It should be a blast.
Yeah.
It's at 7 p.m.
Yep. I know Susan well. Anyway.
This one's called On Shadows. And in poetry, there are, like falling, there are motifs that other people have noticed have quite a literary history. And I actually went out and I read a book by John Hollander on this one, on shadows. Me and my shadow. Peter Pan lost his. A shadow of my former self. The shadow knows. 90 degrees in the shade. Like silence to sound. Eddies behind boulders. Eclipses, moon phases. Warm-up acts to celebrity. Sundial stylus, marking time. 5 o'clock shadow. Fencing with his shadow. Scared of her shadow. Groundhog, back to sleep. In science, we measured our shadows according to the hour and season. My hand and fingers make a rabbit. Silhouettes on the shade. Shapes cast on a backlit screen. Shades in the underworld. Overshadowed. Under the shadow. The shadow is to imitate, to follow. The PI shadows the adulteress. At 22, a graduate student, lonely, life, and draft deferred, I sat with back to sun, relieved to spy my head and shoulders framed by blocks of light, to have some substance, self-defined and fixed upon a life of thought. The wicker basket, left outside all winter, leans O-shaped against the drain pipe, one side aglow with morning sun, while the other casts its filigree not only over woven innerness and rag of snow below, but over 6 feet of flat ground to a wedge-shaped bulkhead where it climbs and joins the solid shadow of the wall, then lays its crescent handle, turned to knife point, over one door. Miraculous! Shadows in her childhood swept up bedroom walls as terrors until I figured it out one night, writes Annie Dillard. Headlights passing in the street. We're walking shadows. Poor players, protests the nihilist Macbeth. victims of significance, body against soul, touch against desire, undreamt of transformations, familiar yet strange.
So I was just going to ask you, got a few minutes left. How is it now that you're retired from a long teaching career at Emerson College, and how is it now being in retirement?
Rejuvenating.
It's rejuvenating. Some people, get bored, but
I hear.
Yeah.
But there's so much that's been backed up, dreams deferred up here, that I live in my head.
Yeah.
And online, and in my books,
Yeah.
and in my writing. And,
So there's
this is the opportunity that I've wanted all my life, and so far I've been worthy of it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. That's good to hear. Well, I think you have time for like a 2-minute poem if you want to. I don't know if you have one.
Okay, there's one called Levity.
Real short one. Okay.
On levity, the opposite of gravity, a serious person, grave as graves, but also weighty as in heavy matters, gravid. Levity is buoyant, from the French, lever, to raise, to make light of hardships, or to levitate, defying gravity, rising in air as if in water, unless we're astronauts in free fall. Any muscle that lifts is a levator. An elevator lifts us from our day. We raise or levy taxes to pay for levees, earthworks to protect us from rising waters. As yeast leavens dough, we ferment deeper thought with humor or with counting small pleasures. Colors in a garden, dewy spiderweb aglow. Toss and nod of breeze-blown full-leaf trees. Tug of kite, strike of fish, voice echoes, a sentence well made.
Well, thank you very much. We got a few minutes. Anything else you'd like to mention, or you were talking about looking for putting out a poetry manuscript and things like that?
Well, I was extremely fortunate to find Mad Hat Press, which is a Massachusetts small press. Has been
South Adams, right? North Adams.
Yeah, North Adams. And the editor and publisher is poet Mark Vincennes. He designed the cover, and I've enjoyed working with him. They're doing another collection of family essays in 2020. The idea of a chapbook, that's brand new to me. And again, this is unpremeditated, and I guess what's...
All right, well,